Cemeteries, graveyards, boneyards, mausoleums, necropolis. These are a few of my favorite things. But walking through graveyards isn't just about getting your goth on. Cemeteries tell our human history, and they tell national history too. Take Central Park, for instance. In 1857, it was Seneca Village, a, quote, rare haven of black ownership stretching from West 82nd to 89th Street. New York took it over, seizing it for the park. And that means part of the park is also a burial ground, and tells the story of how black people were treated even in the supposedly free North. And that's just one little tidbit from a book that is sure to be near and dear to our peculiar family, Over My Dead Body by Greg Melville. The chapters take us on a journey via cemeteries around the country, from the mass graves at Colonial Jamestown to Brooklyn's Greenwood Cemetery, the racially segregated Laurel Grove Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia, Hollywood Forever, and even a digital graveyard. You know, Facebook? Aptly put by the New York Times, this book is a social history. Quote, what does the act of memorializing, who is remembered and who is left out, tell us about the people who lived, what they valued, and the way we live now? Also, did I mention there are cemeteries?
Hi, Peculiars. I know, not the face you were expecting to see. You know, if you've been watching us since season 1, you know that every once in a while, me or Brandy get called away on important business. And unfortunately, Brandy is overseas right now. I think she's in England right now, helping with a conference and doesn't have the connectivity to make it work tonight. So you're going to get a Davey hosted show. That's right. I'm Davey Barris, her producer and co-host, stepping in. But you know what? We're going to have a really fun show because we've got Greg Melville with us to talk about his book, Over My Dead Body. So let's go ahead and bring Greg onto the show. Hey, Greg, welcome.
Hey, thanks. And hello to Peculiars and hi, Brandy, wherever you are.
Yes.
I'm excited to be here.
Well, we are very excited to have you. And the Peculiars, I saw your conversation going on ahead of time. They were all talking about the eclipse and where their experience was watching the eclipse. I guess we haven't gotten together since then to talk about it as a family. So I know I'm in Cleveland, so we were talking about this before the show. I was in the line of totality. I actually got to film it for Case Western where I work, and so I had a very cool experience. Where were you? Where did you get to see it?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
I went. So we had about. I want to say thank you to the people who are complimenting my shirt. I love this shirt. Wear it all the time.
Yes, Abigail.
Yeah. So I could see it in my back. We were at 91% here in Delaware, so we didn't get the full effect. Unfortunately, it just kind of got dusky and chilled off a little bit. But yeah, so I don't really have an exciting eclipse story, unfortunately.
I mean, yeah. Does anyone have an exciting eclipse story? But it's one of those things you just experience, right? It's even hard to describe what it was like in the past, but it got very dark here. Very dark.
So did you need to use special equipment to capture it or?
Yeah. So I like your typical video camera has what's called an ND filter on it. You know, your Windows 2 sometimes have that, what makes them dark. So you're not blinded by the sun. And so like, you'll get like 4 stops of ND, maybe 6 stops. We had to get 16 stops of ND. So it was a piece of glass like about that thick that you basically just stuck right in front of the lens of the camera to be able to film it. So it was some intense heavy duty stuff. Leanne had 85% totality where she was.
All right.
And Jennifer says, this is a good way to start. Hey, Greg, got a dad joke for us?
Can I give you 2?
Absolutely.
Okay. They're really bad. The first one is, why are graveyards so loud?
Why?
Thank you. Because of all the coffin.
There you go.
Okay, and then I got that one. They had a raffle at the graveyard the other day. It was a dead giveaway.
You've got good dad timing on it too. Not to oversell it too much.
Yeah, it's like you got to have that almost embarrassed but really psyched that you're making the joke.
Jennifer, I'm glad you remembered that because I did forget that fun part of the book where you got to embarrass your daughter on school trips. Your whole family seems to be supportive of your hobby, but not totally with you on it. How's everything at home? How's that relationship going with your interest in graveyards and cemeteries?
It's going okay. It still largely involves bribery. I go to cemeteries, I was at Congressional Cemetery this weekend, and I had to go solo. Congressional Cemetery in DC. They had a book festival out there, and so I checked that out and actually talked. And so I couldn't get any takers because I've used all the good bribes up for the most part, but they still humor me from time to time. And sometimes my wife will actually point out a cemetery. So she's growing. She's growing in that way.
Yeah, I was wondering that. So my wife's family are all birders, and every now and then, like some knowledge that's just stuck will, come out of my wife. She'll be like, "Oh yeah, it's a red-winged blackbird," or call something out. And I'm like, "Ah, you were paying attention." So I wondered if your daughter accidentally, like, was she amongst her friends and accidentally spouts off a piece of trivia about a cemetery or a dad joke because it seeped into her brain from.
No, I think you tell a dad joke over her dead body.
There you go. There you go.
But like we went to Natchez, Mississippi. There was a literary festival out there, and we went to one of the old cemeteries out there. And she was gung ho about it, and it was amazing. It was this really gothic cemetery, and right next to it was a national cemetery as well. And the stories in some of these places are just really remarkable. So she digs the stories, for sure.
Well, excellent. So, peculiars, you know how this works. Get your questions in. If you mark it with a big Q or something at the beginning so it stands out to me, that will help because, of course, I'm running solo tonight. Let's see. Yeah, the cemeteries, someone said cemeteries are great for birding using Ballinger. Yeah. Were you on a birding trip with one of your tours you were talking about of a cemetery?
Yeah, Mount Auburn Cemetery. In a lot of places, a lot of the rural cemeteries and a lot of the East Coast cities seem to be on the great bird migration flyway. And so a lot of them are the best, most enticing green spaces that you'll see in somewhere like Baltimore or Philadelphia or even in Boston. And the birds find their way there. And so in April and May, they're pretty amazing places to be able to see just a remarkable variety of birds who are going off to their summer homes and just taking a quick break along the way.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to get into some of these questions in a second. So go ahead, start filling up the chat with questions. I should do the official things and go through our announcements really quick. So Brandy will be pleased at us if we go through all the business of it. So obviously, make sure you're on the live chat feature and not the other tab, the top chat. So make sure you switch that to live chat so you stay up to date on the conversation. But there's so many ways to connect with us. All the social medias. I know Brandy has even adventured into the new social medias. I have not. I don't know which one to dive into yet. So I don't know where to go on those. The Peculiar newsletter, make sure you're signing up for the Peculiar newsletter. And I'm guessing a lot of you joining us live are, but for those of you who listen on the podcast, who watch us after, make sure to get on the newsletter, because not only does Brandy send out information about the show, but she it's her personality. She does little write-ups in there too. You get to see behind the scenes of Brandy a little bit and enjoy some of her writing. So podcasters, I changed the show notes to make sure that the newsletter link is now in the show notes if you're one of our podcast listeners. Patreon is a great way to get into some of the exclusive VIP shows that we do, the authors hosting authors and some of the special things that Brandy continues to work on. So make sure to check out the Patreon link. The cocktail, and correct me if someone made a miraculous come from behind on the name of the cocktail, please let me know in the comments. But when I checked it this afternoon, the Cocoa Coffin was the winner of the cocktail award. And I like that. That's a fun name there. So, our drink maven does a fantastic job of coming up with these fun cocktails. Brandy's much more into the cocktails than I am. Her and her husband, her partner, they could put together some really fun cocktails at a party. They're fun people to party with. All right. The YouTube channel, obviously tell your friends about the YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel. Help those numbers grow. And then we do something else. We don't just do the Peculiar Book Club. We've added content, which is the Peculiar Movie Club. We find movies that are tangentially related through themes and ideas to the books we read. So for the book we did last time, we did the What's Gotten Into You, about a book that goes into the human body and how the human body is made. We did the 1987 comedy Inner Space. If you remember, Dennis Quaid, Martin Short, and Meg Ryan. And we were totally late in getting this episode up, so I apologize to all the peculiars. It was not a situation where we couldn't find time to record. I literally could not find 2 hours to watch the movie. The peculiars know this, but we just had twin baby girls in our family. So I got 2 babies in the house, and yeah, finding 2 hours to watch a movie was nearly impossible. But the episode is up. So it was supposed to premiere on April 18th, and it premiered like 2 days ago. So make sure to go check out a fun conversation about some of those 80s stars and a fun 80s movie. The movie we got coming up next month, I think you're really going to dig. For our next book is all about aliens and alien encounters and UFOs. So we are going to do the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, an absolute sci-fi legend. So we've done some obscure movies, I know, but we're doing a real legend for you here coming up in May. So hopefully that episode will be out May 23rd. So that is all our announcements, Greg. Thank you for hanging in there for all that. And let's get into the questions, because I see they are starting to fill up here. Sadie Simmons is bragging about her local cemetery. And I have a feeling if you want to brag about your local cemetery or ask Greg if he's visited it, go ahead and throw it in the comments. She said our local tourist attraction cemetery, Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta, has restrooms and a great annual plant sale and a music festival. Have you been to the Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta?
I have been to Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta, and it's gorgeous. And it's, if I'm not mistaken, I'm sure it's one of the most popular tourist attractions among the many in Atlanta. And I see in the conversation a lot about bathrooms in cemeteries, and I would be lost if there were not bathrooms in cemeteries. So many of them have, especially now, as they've kind of expanded their appeal to get the general public in, just to kind of be inviting to the general public. They need public bathrooms. So yeah, it's not a strange thing, believe it or not, at a lot of cemeteries. I know that it seems like there's a debate on that. And so I would say that, yeah, in a good number, they got them.
There you go. All right. Abigail Schroeder, she asks, I'll help Davey out and kick off the book questions. What's your favorite fact from the book, and what did you have to leave out that you think everyone should know?
Okay. Favorite fact in the book, I would say, is that there are 10 times as many cemeteries as there are McDonald's in the United States. And there are 8 times as many cemeteries or graveyards or burial grounds than there are Starbucks. I think that people don't realize how commonplace, how ubiquitous cemeteries are because we take them for granted. We pass by so many every day on the bus or walking to work or driving to work. And so a lot of times they don't even register. And each one of these places has so much history packed into them, has so many stories. That's kind of the big, those are the big statistics that I think people take for granted exactly how many of these spaces we have. I think as far as anything that I left out, I couldn't leave anything out. My goal throughout the book was to try and get people to be surprised with every page. So I tried to constantly find as much information as I could. And it was like every hour, every day of research, I just found more and more stuff because so few people have written about the history of cemeteries. There was so much for me to tell and say and put in there. And I was insufferable at dinner every night as I would give all of my cemetery facts. And no one was quite as interested as I was about all the different cemetery stories, but they put up with me, fortunately.
Yeah, I guess when you're writing a book like that as an author, we haven't really, I don't think this has come up with many authors, but like it becomes your world, right? And, honey, how was your day at work? Well, I spent my entire day learning these fun facts. So get ready because here they come.
Yep, exactly. And it's one thing if it's like on whales or birds, but when it's disposing of dead bodies, it's a little bit different, but
Yeah, I was shocked. The story about visiting your friends, was it out in California that you were visiting your friends and they didn't even want you to talk about it?
yeah, it's I guess to each their own.
Yeah.
But I mean that's not uncommon, right? Like so when people ask me about this book, or they'll say, "Oh, you wrote a book," and I say, "Oh yeah, it's about cemeteries," and then a good percentage of people will be like, "Ooh, oh, wow, that's kind of creepy. Why would you do that?" And then, of course, fortunately, I'm in a crowd of people who are more likely right now, who are more likely to say, "Oh, cool, that's really interesting. I want to find out more." And really, I hope that it's told in a way that people who may not realize how interesting cemeteries are can pick up the book, and it will be accessible to them, and they won't be creeped out by it. That it tells a good story about us and about our country and about how we treat others and how we treat the dead and how that reflects on us as a society.
Yeah, well, you're definitely in the right crowd here. I think any of the peculiars that if we broke bread with you, we would want you to get into all the gory details. We wouldn't want you to leave a detail out here. So, all right, let's jump back in for another question. Kristen had a question earlier on, and I think they wanted to hear this one. So I scrolled back up and found it, Kristen. She said, "So since it's another time, can we hear the story about the grave dug in the wrong place?"
Okay. I actually met the person who runs the cemetery now, and my father is buried there. But I met them separately from that, and they're like, "So tell me the story. Was it this burial?" And I was like, "No, it had nothing to do with that burial. But tell me about that burial." But basically, what happened was we dug this grave. And it was about a half hour before, and it's funny in some regards, but it's also pretty serious as well. And so we dug this grave, and we had about a half hour. The vault company had come in, put the vault down. The funeral home was coming to check everything out beforehand, so they had a limo come out before everyone came out. And right beforehand, I noticed that there was no gravestone by the grave. So I said, "Well, who was the person who was buried here?" And they said the name of the person. Then I looked over about 20 feet, and there was the name of the person and the name of the person's wife. And it turned out that they thought that they had dug the wrong hole, and that they were about to bury this person like 3 plots down from their wife. So the funeral home guy comes up, and he just, at this point, the people who are my supervisors, they're like, "Oh, we dug the grave in the wrong place, and we're not going to tell the family. We're going to put down AstroTurf and everything." And the guy from the funeral home rightfully started yelling at them, all of us, including myself, calling us all kinds of names that were pretty accurate. We were not the brightest bulbs in the shed for doing this. And part of it is that, honestly, that most cemeteries are pretty shoddy when it comes to record keeping and where people are buried, the old cemeteries.
Yeah.
That go way back.
Yeah, Susan Ballinger says, "I'm guessing this happens more than you'd think."
Yes, and it honestly does. So what they did is they have a probe, and they started probing down. It's just basically a piece of rebar to find if there were any other any other burials around there. And then after, so they had the.
I like that you called it a probe. It's a big stick, but probe is much more scientific.
They would hammer it in, and so they actually put the site where the gravestone was. This is turning into a really long story. So that the family, as if that was where the burial was going to be, the family left. And then with the probe, they found that actually they dug the right spot because they found the wife, or they believed was the wife, but they had put the stone in the wrong spot. So they were able to, if I remember correctly, they were able to move the stone. The hole that we dug was actually the right hole. But it was like this whole to do, and it was chaos. That did not go in.
Yeah, there you go. You would think it's a name and a body, and it's two things you got to keep track of. But I guess it's easy to get them mixed up when you do it over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So
there you go. You got the story, Peculiars. Yeah. Sadie says, really, whomst among us hasn't had one of those moments?
Yep. Agreed. Thank you, Sadie.
All right, let's jump in here to our next question. Leanne asks, death in space, is reverse cremation feasible? Body through airlock, desiccate in vacuum, and retrieved and pulverized. Are you following along with Leanne here?
That goes beyond my scope of knowledge. I think there are probably some peculiars who might have better answers for that than I would. I haven't really investigated death in space.
Yeah.
I like that comment. Digging holes in the wrong spots is a hobby of mine.
I mean, we've seen it in sci-fi. I don't know the history of, astronauts or anything like that. Has any astronaut actually, I know obviously astronauts have died on takeoff. Has anyone actually died in space that we know of? If there's any NASA peculiar nerd, any peculiar nerds about NASA and space and stuff like that. Because I guess, yeah, we've seen how Star Trek or Star Wars or some of those other sci-fi movies, would handle it. It's usually just launching a coffin into space, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say there were the cosmonauts who there was that tragic accident with the cosmonauts in the 1960s, wasn't there?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know the history well enough. I trust the peculiars. If dogs and chimps. William says dog. Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah. There's some. Yeah. Russian. Susan said, yeah. Russians probably. Suez 3 or 11. Leanne says, yeah. Dogs or chimps. There's probably dogs or chimps that are still flying through the galaxy, aren't there? Probably. Unfortunately.
Ooh. Recommendation of Mary Roach, A City on Mars. Yeah.
If it's a Mary Roach recommendation, we endorse it on this show.
Yeah, I think I've got Mary Roach. I have, of course, I've got Stiff right here.
So that was our inaugural book. That was the very first Peculiar Book Club episode. Was Stiff. All right, and Susan, just to throw some plugs in for my Peculiar Movie podcast. Susan says, thanks for encouraging me to go back and finish Don't Look Up. I stopped the first time due to Jennifer Lawrence's terrible haircut. The political shade was hilarious in retrospect. Awesome. I'm glad you went back and enjoyed it. Yeah, I hope these movies, we go all over the place with the movies because the books are all over the place. So sometimes it's something very mainstream, like Don't Look Up, which was a few years ago, or Close Encounters, which is a legendary movie. And sometimes it's very obscure. All right, let's jump back in. Mary Roach has a book for kids too, Packing for Mars. I think I remember talking about that when she was on the show. Elizabeth says, I think Space Burial came up in Caitlin Doherty's book.
Yeah, Caitlin Doughty.
Dottie.
Yeah.
All right. Next question, please. Catherine Camille. She asks, Greg, in your book, you eloquently speak a great deal about the burial space's marginalized populations. Did you do any research on burials at mental institutions?
Yeah, I have actually. It's funny. I go running about once a month on this bike path through Wilmington, Delaware, that goes along the river, and it goes by this women's prison. And on the right-hand side is a potter's field. And then on the left-hand side is also a potter's field. And the left-hand side is the old state mental institution. and it was the original, where the original Potter's Field for the state was. And then it was kind of carried over to the right. And then if you keep running, you hit a bridge, you hit I-95, Interstate 95. And part of the Potter's Field is actually buried under I-95. When they built it, they basically put an ad in the paper saying, if anyone has any relatives who they would like to remove, you can remove your relative at your expense, or we're basically going to pave over it. And it's a pretty amazing cemetery, or series of cemeteries. They are only marked with these little concrete markers that are only a few inches tall, and each one just has a number on it. It doesn't even have a name of the people, and it's still an active burial ground today. So there are some volunteers who take care of the Potter's Fields. So I took a tour of it with one of the caretakers who volunteers, and she's an amazing person, and she works with the institution, and it really got me into doing some research on the unclaimed dead, and trying to understand all of the history behind it, where where Potter's Field still exist, and how different states handle the unclaimed dead. And one thing that I found from talking to someone from Congressional Cemetery in Washington, D.C., they were telling me about a year ago about how they have a ceremony that's very similar to the one that they have in Los Angeles, where the unclaimed dead in Washington, D.C. are cremated, and then they are placed in a single grave each year, the unclaimed dead, during this interfaith ceremony, their remains, their cremated remains. And she was the person who is the head of the cemetery. She was telling me about how moving the ceremony is, and how family members come either during that time or during the course of the year to visit their loved ones, and how often the unclaimed dead aren't who we think they are. They are just people, for whatever reason, whose families could not afford a burial, or who could not, or didn't really, died alone, and there weren't the resources to bury them. But they're not the population of people who get buried in Potter's Fields or the unclaimed dead in other places. It's a wide variety of people who we leave behind, and oftentimes, like in Delaware, they lose agency in a lot of ways. And so I really want to write about it. I got to figure out how to do it and tell a story in long form about the people who care about and care for the Potter's Fields and the unclaimed dead, and those kind of silent heroes.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely sounds like there's a story there to be told. Kristen points out, and I'll join in on Kristen's comment, because Potter's Field sounds kind of folksy. So you're like, oh, but it's not. It's really not a great thing. She said, I was very happy to finally find out the origin of Potter's Field from this book. It's one of those things I always wondered, but never bothered researching.
Yeah. I guess the same goes for me, to realize that it was this biblical term, basically, was really fascinating to me. And, that it derives from the blood money that Judas received in the Potter's Field, where the gold was thrown, and how, it's just amazing stuff. Interesting.
Lorelei Peterson says that sounds like it would be an amazing book. So,
yeah, I've thought about, I've done research on different groups who care for Potter's Fields, and I've talked to people who do, and they're all amazing people who do it on their own time. Sometimes it's like a school, and school kids will do it in order to give agency to the people who live there, or the permanent residents, I should say. But it's, I want to. It's like I want to tell a long form magazine story about it, and kind of alert people to what it says about us that we don't even take care of really. And we oftentimes perpetuate their anonymity in death, and what that says about us.
All right. Well, on that note, I think it's a good place to maybe take our intermission, our musical interlude, and Peculiars, keep throwing questions in the chat. I will go back through the chat and make sure I didn't miss anything while we're listening to Charming Disaster. That's right. We might not have Brandy here, but we have our house band, Charming Disaster. They do our theme music, Greg, and they're with us fairly regularly here on the show. And Peculiars, I think you're going to like this one. I think they cooked up something really special. So I give you Charming Disaster.
Oh, hello, Peculiars.
It's your favorite goth folk duo, Charming Disaster.
And if you're anything like us, you've read a lot of Edgar Allan Poe stories.
A lot of Edgar Allan Poe stories.
And it turns out you can get some really good practical advice from those stories.
It's super helpful.
For answering universal questions such as,
what do you do with a corpse?
Did you ever have a day when you're trying to drink and your favorite cat walks in and your tiny heart sinks because just yesterday you hung it from a string and now your wife's in the way when you've got an axe you're trying to swing? Did you ever meet someone with a filmy blue eye and when he looks at you, it's kind of hard to describe you even like this man, but you know he's got to die and so you carry out a plan in the middle of the night? Do you chop it up and burn the bits or throw it in a well, or do you pack it in a box and ship it, dig a grave down in the cellar? What do you do with a corpse? Don't you worry about the smell, and also how do you know when someone's dead? Sometimes it's hard to tell. When your friend's beloved sister dies one tragic afternoon, do you hold off on the burial and lock her in a room? On a dark and stormy night, when she rises from the tomb, you will realize she was only in a cataleptic swoon. When you have a little problem you don't want folks to find, or perhaps you've been insulted and revenge is on your mind, just go down to the basement in the back behind the wine. Consider some home masonry to cover up your crime. Do you chop it up and burn the bits or throw it in a well, or do you pack it in a box and ship it, dig a grave down in the cellar? What do you do with a corpse? Don't you worry about the smell, and also how do you know when someone's dead? Sometimes it's hard to tell. One morning in cool blood, I stopped the drum beat of a heart, and never have I slept so very well. You know I am not mad, because my senses are acute. I can hear things in heaven, earth, and hell. Were you ever taken over by that fiend intemperance? Were you ever so influenced by that gin-nurtured malevolence to offer your own wife a taste of personal violence till you know you have destroyed all hope of God's mercy or innocence? Don't you hate it when a sick man's in your mesmerizing gaze? Though he passes in the night, you've got him twitching for many days, and he gives you a nasty fright when he croaks, "Let me die, please." Once you release him from his state, he turns to goo like marmalade.
heroes. Do you chop it up and burn the bits or throw it in a well, or do you pack it in a box and ship it? Dig a grave down in the cellar. What do you do with the corpse? Don't you worry about the smell, and also how do you know when someone's dead? Sometimes it's hard to tell. Do you chop it up and burn the bits or throw it in a well, or do you pack it in a box and ship it? Dig a grave down in the cellar. What do you do with the corpse? Don't you worry about the smell, and also how do you know when someone's dead? Sometimes it's hard to tell. Do you chop it up and burn the bits or throw it in a well, or do you pack it in a box and ship it? Dig a grave down in the cellar. What do you do with the corpse? Don't you worry about that smell, and also how do you know when someone's dead? Sometimes it's hard to tell.
Wow, they are fantastic. Charming Disaster. That one, I have a feeling like a day from now, I'm going to be like, that's going to find its way back into my head. I'm going to be like singing it at work and have to explain what the heck's running through my head. I'm like that. Songs get stuck in my head and they just run. I feel like Greg, is this the first time you've heard Charming Disaster?
Well, I've tuned into a couple of the peculiar talks, so I have been able to enjoy the unique beauty of Charming Disaster a couple of times.
We've been listening to them for a few seasons now, and I'm sure some of you knew them from before Peculiar Book Club. They've always been great. I think they've been getting better. Like I feel like their songs are getting more and more sophisticated, and the lyrical turns and that was a really good one.
I'm curious what people's favorite Poe stories are. I have a story of a Poe story I can probably tell, but it's not about cemeteries. But I'm curious. I'm
sure they would love the tangent. I encourage you, go down that tangent.
Let's go down that tangent. I'd love to see comments. We have one not really, for Cask of Amontillado.
Yeah, Sadie said she wants a public reading of the Cask of Amontillado. I'm glad you pronounced it before I had to, because she said she, for some reason, could not pronounce it that night, and the audience just filled in.
Okay, so that one's my favorite. As I've said in the book, I taught English at the Naval Academy for 5 years, and I would sometimes teach Poe. The Cask of Amontillado is obviously a big favorite. Some of them can be kind of very challenging. But during COVID one time, my students were kind of down because life sucked.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, we're gonna do something different. I'm gonna throw a Poe in there. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have them read Mask of the Red Death. And I hadn't read it in a long time. I just remembered, I love Mask of the Red Death. They're gonna love Mask of the Red Death. And then, I sign it. I'm really excited about it. And the students are reading it. And then, so I'm reading it like the night before. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's,
I don't know it. So
it's basically where this group of this plague has taken over and is killing everyone. And so it probably wasn't the best. Of this like hedonist society. So, but
we get an ooh from Susan and OMG from Lorelai and a very on the nose from Susan.
Yeah, it was probably subliminal, but it wasn't really the effect I was looking for with the students, yeah, but great story.
I think as a teacher, you could probably spin that and be like, you all know why I picked this story out.
Yeah, exactly. I did this on purpose. I'm thinking on a higher level.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I feel like I need to read some Edgar Allan Poe now. If I could squeeze it in between our next peculiar episode on our next peculiar book we have to read. Okay. I got a lot of comments here. A lot of people shouting out things from their cemeteries. Jennifer Pierce says, in Edinburgh, I was surprised to see a statue of Abe Lincoln in Old Calton Cemetery. It was built in 1893. I'm guessing the cemetery, not the statue. Oh, no, maybe the statue. The statue commemorates the Scots who fought on behalf of the Union during the Civil War. Have you been to Old Calton Cemetery?
I haven't, but it's now. I'm writing it down as we speak.
There we go.
I really want to do. I want to do Over My Dead Body European Vacation. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I really want to, because there are just so many awesome cemeteries that I still feel like have so many amazing stories that I'd love to research first, and then tell. So I'm compiling this list of European cemeteries that I definitely want to visit. So.
Yeah, it probably not the best sequel to the Vacation movies, but it could be a great sequel for your book.
Yeah.
Sadie says, I love the cemeteries from the era during which people approach them as parks.
Yeah.
No headstone lawnmower friendly ones with plastic flowers distribute to each plot are so depressing. Isn't that weird to think like there's the good version of cemeteries and there's the depressing ones? Yeah.
No, but I kind of agree. For sure, because the artistry is lost and the uniqueness of it, whether it's the epitaphs or the choice of headstones that people use, or in some places the mausoleums or the family plots and how those are decorated, and so the kind of homogeneous country club aspect of the denial of death through those lawn park cemeteries, I find them kind of depressing as well. I think that's a great word for it.
Catherine Camille gave a shout out for submitting a plug for Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester, New York. It's an old rural style cemetery and the burial place of Frederick Douglass. Have you been to Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester?
Been to Mount Hope.
There you go.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, it's a classic rural cemetery.
They started talking about, Amanda said, we have tons of little cemeteries in rural areas and ghost towns here in Utah. And then Sadie joined in and said, we also have tiny family plots or similar that are set aside in modern developments. There's a little one in a Walmart parking lot even.
Yeah. So the ones in the old ghost towns are amazing, right? Because how else do you really understand the life of that town, of those forgotten places, of those abandoned places, unless you look at the cemeteries? That's what tells you what went on there. And so, yeah, that's the first place I would go for sure. And then it's interesting, if you go in the Midwest and you go through farm fields, you oftentimes see a stand of trees off in the distance in the middle of farm fields. And generally that is the family plot, or an old cemetery plot that has lasted for generations, whoever owns the cemetery now. It really depends on the place, on really the state and the state laws on whether or not that Walmart can move, or in some cases even plow over a cemetery, or a farm, an industrial farm, needs to leave the old family cemetery from the generation of farmers that lived there before, or whether it has to stay put.
So they want to go on a tangent right now, and I'm going to allow this. I will allow it. Randy says, has anyone ever told you that you look like Sting? Speaking of musicians, why do you hate Jim Morrison? Overrated, really?
No, I haven't gotten the Sting comment. That's fine. All right. I'm going to pull that tonight. I'm going to tell my family, don't you know I look like Sting? You got to treat me a little nicer. I won't make any Sting jokes because those will be really bad. Okay, I will. Yeah, if my kids, if my kids get in my face the next time, I just say, don't stand so close to me.
There you go. Don't stand so close.
Don't. But okay, so I've gotten a lot of grief about, like, angry hate mail about Jim Morrison. I get one every couple of weeks about some, and then like on Goodreads, someone will do a review of my book and they'll be like, oh, well, it was 4 stars, but I had to give it 3 because of the Jim Morrison comment. Like, that really got people angry. So it was an unkind throwaway line. I used to be a big Doors fan, and then I kind of got off the Doors bandwagon. And so,
You got an LOL from Randy.
Yeah, maybe I need to rethink it because I get a lot of angry comments there. So
It's okay. You know, there's some bands that it just doesn't. U2 for me. I just do not vibe with U2. I don't. Bono's singing voice. It does nothing for me, and I'm out. I'm out on U2. So everybody has theirs.
Well, I'm judging you.
Yeah, there you go. I can't please everybody. Sting, though, I do enjoy Sting.
He was in
Okay.
Only Murders in the Building, right? The first season, I think.
He was. Yeah, he had the celebrity apartment in the. That's good. Susan says, "Thank you, Davey."
No,
Are you agreeing with me, Susan, on the U2 thing? I'm not sure.
We can't be trashing U2, please.
Lorelai says, "Same, Davey." Wow. This will be the great divide of the Peculiar Book.
Okay.
Brandy's going to come back, and we're going to have a whole civil war here fought over.
Okay, I admit
U2 and the Doors.
that Bono does take himself a little too seriously, but I do love U2. I'm sorry.
All right. Let's get back into the questions here. We do have the quiz coming up, and I'm telling you, I got a good one. I was telling my wife, like, sometimes I feel like I make the quizzes a little too hard. Sometimes they're funny, but a little too easy. I think I hit the sweet spot with this quiz. So I'm very much looking forward to it. Leanne asked, I never thought about the difference between caskets and coffins. There's a lot of mixed terminology that's interchangeable when it comes to the whole burial world.
Yeah, so caskets and coffins, and that was the type of stuff that I loved researching and making sure that I got right, and going down the rabbit holes of finding out the origins of everything. And I found a lot of what was really interesting is because no one really does any research on the stuff. Like there aren't a lot of historians who are like cemetery historians, just like I found out there aren't a lot of environmentalists. Like literally I read this journal article that said that environmental researchers are creeped out by cemeteries. Therefore, there hasn't been a lot of research on the environmental impacts of cemeteries. And so a lot of this history stuff, I was kind of trying to track it down myself. Like it was kind of this common idea that the origin of the word cemetery really came from Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts in the 1820s. And I was like, oh, okay. I've seen this a bunch of places, that it was a phrase that was coined by the founder of Mount Auburn to make it seem like a fancy, fancier than a graveyard or a burial ground. And that's kind of the common thing. But then I read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which was written before Mount Auburn was founded. And she refers to a cemetery as a cemetery in it. In Europe. And I was like, in Switzerland, I was like, oh, okay. So he didn't coin the phrase. Interesting. Although he popularized the phrase. So there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of stories behind the origins of a lot of things that aren't necessarily true. And so it was fun kind of tracking that down.
All right, there you go. Kristen Meston has a question for you. Kristen, I had this started from before, but I'm glad you brought it forward again. I was trying to work my way back to it. She asked, they recently seem to have rebranded human composting as terramation. Do you think this will help in adopting it?
That's a really good question. And I think someone mentioned before, Caitlin Doughty. Yeah, obviously. And I think that Caitlin Doughty is someone who uses some of the more modern terms, and also funeral homes generally use the more modern terms as well. They don't like to at all use the words human composting because people won't do it. I think that as it becomes more commonplace, I think the terminology will change because it does sound so negative, although it doesn't freak me out. I mean, there's a good chance that I'll be mulched and probably placed in the backyard, knowing my family. And so I don't really mind it. And so, but yeah, I think that among the outspoken proponents for it, they're pretty adamant about making sure that the name, that a more appropriate name, a more respectful terms used. And then, of course, the opponents of it are the ones who are really kind of pushing the human composting phrase as well.
Yeah, that's politics of it, probably, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of the politics behind it. Well, there are two really. There's the the death industrial complex, the death industry, but then also some it's also a faith-based one as well.
Yeah.
That it's not necessarily being adopted by, for instance, the Catholic Church, and so there's that opposition as well.
It's amazing how in the political sphere you can weaponize a word, and then like it can't be unweaponized. Once human composting is a weaponized word, it can't be undone. And I think we've seen that in recent presidential elections, how a simple word can be weaponized and then driven home.
Yep, for sure.
All right, so I'm gonna jump into the quiz here, and we'll still try to squeak in a few more comments from the peculiars at the end here. We are getting close to the top of the hour. Greg, you kind of did this to yourself because you posed the question in the book, and I felt like I had to answer it. So we're gonna talk about pizza. And we're going to start with the Virginia slice. So the quiz this week is called Want to Split a Pie? So the Virginia slice is a unique slice of pizza, not because of its flavor or toppings, but because of blank. A, it's so big you need 2 paper plates to serve it. B, it's so small that people order it by the baker's dozen. Or C, it can be cut into pieces where every side has a crust. What do you think makes the Virginia slice so special? And the peculiars will help you out here. I'm very curious.
I need a friend.
You could definitely, it takes them a second. They're a few seconds behind us, but they will start filling up the chat with their answers. This was fun. I went down, I'd actually recently watched a video about this, about regional pizzas. And there's a great YouTube channel called Weird History Food. I don't know why it's not Weird Food History, but it's Weird History Food. And they do these great, like 10, 12-minute deep dives on all sorts of topics. Like, your favorite snack foods from the 1980s and what happened to them, or the history of regional pizzas. So Randy's guessing C.
I'm going with C myself. That's where I was.
Abigail's A, I think.
Yeah, I unless I get another vote, either for a tiebreaker. Nothing is small in the U.S. All right, then I'm going C.
He's going C. The answer is, what makes the Virginia slice so special? It's so big you need 2 paper plates to serve it. Look at that. I don't even think that photo does it justice.
Okay. Abigail, I'm sorry.
The actual pie, I think, is like 28 inches in diameter, something like that. They actually, at this restaurant that was in the first photo, Benny's, which is the famous place there in Virginia, they do like a food challenge where if you eat the whole pie in an hour, and one person in the history of the entire place, one person has completed the food challenge.
Wow.
So if you're really hungry, head down for a Virginia slice. All right.
That's
question number 2. We do 3 questions, so hang in there.
All right.
Right here in Ohio, you'll find Ohio Valley style pizza, which is known for this last-minute addition before it's served. Is it A, a scoop of guacamole on each slice, B, a homemade blend of red pepper flakes and spices to make it extra spicy, or is it C, a pile of cold cheese and pepperonis?
Ooh.
What do you think? A little Mexican flavor to it, make it extra super spicy. That's the way I would eat it. I like the extra spicy. Or is it a pile of cold cheese and pepperonis?
Last minute addition.
Yeah. Thrown on right as they hand the pizza to you, they throw it on right before they serve it to you. What do you think, peculiars? Abigail is once again guessing C.
Okay.
Part 2, Electric Boogaloo.
All right.
Sadie says, I want all of them.
C because ooh. All right, I'm going
because
C.
All right. The answer is a pile of cold cheese and pepperonis. I think the original theory was it was like the hot pizza was supposed to melt it while you were driving home with it, was the original theory behind it. But then they serve it like that in the restaurant. So, I mean, just a pile of cold cheese and cold pepperonis thrown right on top.
Yeah, that's just a way to ruin a pizza.
Yes. Susan gave us the throwing up emoji
Yeah.
in the comments.
Yeah.
Although cold pizza, I mean, don't get me wrong, cold pizza is fantastic. There's some days where I would rather have cold pizza for lunch than reheat the pizza. All right, question number 3.
Ooh.
Altoona style pizza might be the most challenging style of pizza that we've discussed yet, because they use this kind of cheese to top their pizza. Is it A, a spread of Cheese Whiz, B, a slice of American cheese, or C, a lattice design of string cheese? Which untraditional cheese topping do you think they use on the Altoona style pizza, which they call the Altoona Sicilian style, which I don't think people from Sicily would agree with this.
And this is in Arizona, but it's Altoona, like in
No, Altoona. This is Altoona, Pennsylvania.
Oh, it's Altoona, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, this is Altoona, Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one.
B, and I know this. All right. I was gonna go Cheese Whiz, but I guess I gotta go B then.
Yeah, who is it? The comments are coming in fast now. Abigail says, I hate that I know this. Susan said, oh my God, no. Kristen said, okay, this is all putting me off of having pizza for dinner. Sadie's in on all of these. She says, all of these, please. The answer is yes, B, a slice of American cheese. And I spent a long time on Google image search finding the right disgusting photo to use.
Wow.
For our graphic here. For our podcast listeners, you're missing out on a good one here. Google it, please. Do an image search on Altoona style pizza.
That makes me sad.
Yeah, it's always a bell pepper ring, a green bell pepper ring, and I think a slice of salami, and then they just slap a piece of American cheese on top.
Oh.
And people, you got to look into this. You got to look into these regional pizzas. It's insane. There's one that's just all sauce. There's just not even any cheese. They call it like a red stick or something like that. There's one in Colorado that they claim is heftier, bulkier than Chicago style deep dish. It's actually, if you can imagine a giant casserole of pizza, actually thicker than that. There's one out in Colorado like that.
I'm trying to look it up right now.
Yeah, Abigail says they've confused pizza with open-faced sandwich. Chris said the people of Altoona must be so sad.
Oh.
I'm surprised. I was waiting for a commenter that was like, actually, I kind of like it. I've had it before. Oh my God, the comments are coming in faster. Who knew pizza was such a hotbed issue? They're coming in faster than we can read them. All right, I'll jump back into my starred comments here and see if we could have one more. One more comment I definitely wanted to throw in there. I'm guessing Sadie is making this comment for Ryan. She said, in college in Georgia, we had a 27-hole Frisbee golf course in Rose Hill Cemetery, totally on the down low, borderline trespassing. Sunday morning hangover helper. Dwayne Allman was number 9.
I gotta look up Rose Hill Cemetery.
There we go. We're adding more cemeteries to his list here.
I want to check that out. That's and so that's the big debate with different burial grounds, right? What is allowed and what is respectful and what is not respectful, and sometimes I get asked that question. It really depends on the place, right? It depends on the history of the place. It depends on the setting. It depends on oftentimes how traditional and orthodox the faith is of the really founding of the cemetery and who's buried there. I don't think Frisbee golf at Arlington National Cemetery would work so well.
No.
But at the same time, if I were a permanent resident in some rural cemetery and a bunch of people decided to use it as the rural cemeteries were intended to be used in the first place, which is for recreation and to enjoy the scenery, then I'd probably be pretty psyched that there were visitors coming out and enjoying the property.
Yeah, I think if my spirit was lingering there, I think I would enjoy watching a Frisbee golf game go by.
I agree.
Yeah. The pizza comments are too funny. I'm going to use this as an incentive to make sure you go check out the comments. Podcast listeners, join us live if you can, and jump in and enjoy these comments here. All right, one last question. Pet cemeteries. Leanne asked earlier about pet cemeteries. She said, "Been there, done that. It's odd but fun."
Yeah,
I'm guessing she's not talking about the Stephen King book.
yeah, and I agree, and I thought about that as well, but really it kind of strayed from the narrative thread of American history and how I pieced it all together with cemeteries that were either important to American history or somehow told the story of an important moment in American history. But like, there's the one in Los Angeles that's pretty classic. My favorite animal burial ground is the one in at Hemingway's house in Key West. All of his six-toed cats, who he or descendants of them, are all buried in the same spot, and they all have great names as well. I think they have great names. It's usually after movie stars or after writers. And the cats, obviously, as everyone knows, are the six-toed cats are all running around still, and that's a pretty neat spot.
Susan joked, maybe we'll see pickleball courts. No, we're not trying to disturb the dead. We're trying to let them rest. All right. I got to ask you really quick. Lakeview Cemetery here in Cleveland is kind of our legendary cemetery. I believe we have one or two presidents in Lakeview Cemetery, ex-presidents. And have you been there? Have you visited that one?
I have. It's actually the sister of one of my college classmates. I believe is one of the directors of the cemetery. It's again another one of those American classics for sure. Yeah. I haven't gone to college in Ohio.
And I love speaking of cemeteries and odd places, right here in downtown Cleveland, there's a cemetery that is a historic landmark. I don't even know the name of it, but it's right outside of the baseball stadium, Progressive Field. And basically the crowds use it as a cut through to get to the parking lots on 14th Street. And you could go down a main street, you could cut down an alley, but for some reason I love walking through the cemetery. I don't know what it is, but it just makes strolling through downtown. You feel like you're in this weird bubble in downtown. It's a wonderful little walk. So yeah. All right. We'll wrap this up. Greg, thank you so much for joining us. Peculiars, you were amazing. Thank you for keeping the show going in Brandy's absence. And your comments, your questions were all absolutely fantastic tonight. So great job to all our Peculiars watching live.
Yes. Peculiars, thank you for carrying the show.
Absolutely.
You guys are a riot.
All right. And we'll wrap up with Brandy's famous words. Thank you for joining us at a place where if you're weird, you're family.
You got the blue bottle blues when you wake up in the night. Don't make a big mistake, 'cause you can never make it right. When you reach out for the vial, feel the ridges in the glass. It's a matter of survival, baby, better watch your back. There is no antidote. There is no antidote. There is no antidote. There is no